track here in just a few moments. I've got some zoom in and zoom out tools, so if I want to see what the whole thing looks like, I can zoom out and zoom in. And I can see all of this clipping in here, and maybe that was where I was trying to set my record levels. You know, usually if you've ever come in and recorded audio for IMG, we'll say, okay, read a paragraph, and while you're doing that, we're sitting there tweaking levels, trying to make sure that the recording sounds right and that everything's good before we actually start doing our published recording. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, okay, I want to trim off all this junk in the front. It was garbage. I don't want to listen to it. I can listen to the playback if I want to. So, pretty good quality for a $17 microphone. Doesn't do too bad of a job. Whenever you're editing, whenever you're working on your recordings, I always recommend doing it through headphones, not doing it through speakers. The headphones show all. Terry just experienced this last week. She was recording a project and she said, hey, listen to this, tell me what you think. And we were listening through speakers. I said, try it in headphones. And she came back and said, it was awful. It sounded fine through the speakers, but then you hear all the hisses and the pops and you really pick up all that background noise. So I always try to edit when I'm editing or I'm working with audio. I always make sure I do it through headphones just because it seems to pick up a lot more of the detail. So I've decided that this first section I want to dump. And so I'm going to find myself an edit point. And I'm going to edit, say, from right here. So I just click there. And right now, I'm on this is my editing tool palette right here. I'm on the selection tool. So I want to select a section to edit out. So all I got to do is grab here, highlight the section that I want to delete. And of course, if I was zoomed out, this would go quicker. I'll zoom out. Hit the delete key. Away it goes. So I just cut that piece of audio off. Simple as that. Now before I get going too far in my editing process, now I've kind of got, this is the rough file. This is the stuff that I want to pull all together. There's two things that I always do, and this is just personal preference. This is just my workflow that seems to work for me. The two things that I always want to do is I want to run a background filter to pull out any background hiss or noise in the background. And the other thing I want to do is I want to amplify the signal as loud as I can possibly get it. Something that I found really interesting is if you go out and pull a piece of music that was recorded, say, late 70s, early 80s, then pull a piece of music that was recorded recently, and compare the waveforms, these waveforms on the two, you'll see that the stuff that has been recorded recently is actually much, much louder. They've done tests, and most people think that if it's louder, it's a better quality. And so what the recording studios do now is they push the limits and they try to make that track as loud as they possibly can without getting distortion, because people mistake that loudness for a higher quality recording. So it's amazing if you take those two pieces of audio, import them in the waveforms, they look completely different. Even though it can even be the exact same music, but recorded at two different times just based on what the trends were in recording at the time. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to run this filter. If you can see, I got this flat spot right here. That's where I was leaving my quiet space. So under effects, I've got a whole list of tools. They're all grayed out right now. The reason they're all effects, and the reason they're all grayed out right now is because I don't have anything highlighted. The minute I highlight something, it's going to give me the ability to run an effect on there. So I'm going to highlight this section of dead space using my selection tool. And I'm going to click effect now that I can run all these effects on there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and use this noise removal. When I pull up the noise removal, now if you do run 1.3, this tool does look different. This noise removal filter does look different when you open it up, but it effectively does the exact same thing. And this is a two-step process. The first step, one, we need to get the noise profile. So I've left that dead space in the recording, and I'm going to let the tool learn what dead space sounds like so that it can go and remove any of those background hisses, pops, whatever it may be. So I'm going to click Get Noise Profile. And you want to have, they tell you a minimum of 1.5 seconds. I usually, the longer is better. So usually when I walk in the booth and I'm ready to record something, I'll leave 10 or 15 seconds of dead space on the front of it before I ever start recording. So now I've got my noise profile. Now I want to highlight the entire track. And I'll just do it Control A, just like I would on any other software tool, right? Select all. I'm going to go Effect, and I'm going to go Noise Removal again. Now when I do this, it says, okay, what level of noise removal do you want to do? And it's going to default right to the middle. If I preview it, gives me a preview, doesn't sound too bad. One thing I can tell you is right now, if I were to leave that there and I were to do a noise removal and listen to it through my headphones, it would not sound good. It's going to get a very robotic sound to it. Because what happens is if you have the noise removal up too high, it starts to go in and remove certain frequencies and tones in your recording. So it'll sound almost, you know, you're familiar with auto-tune, right? You hear all the songs now that are auto-tuned. It'll sound almost like that because it's removing certain frequencies in your voice path. So I usually drop this guy way down. Yeah, I usually bring it somewhere, you know, within the bottom quarter of noise removal. And I preview it, make sure it sounds good. Again, it's hard to tell through these little speakers what it's doing. But. And then once I've got my selections made, I can click Remove Noise. And it'll go through here, just take a few seconds, depending on the length of the track, and it's removed all the background noise. Now, the big thing that does for us is it's going to clean up our edit points. Almost all audio in the background has some form of background noise in it. Might be a solid tone, might be white noise, might be something that you hear there in the background. What'll happen is if that background noise is very visible or you can really hear it, as you create edit points, you'll hear little pops in that background noise. Even though there might not be any talking or any sound going on at that point, there's still that background noise. So as much of the more background noise that you can remove, the better your end edited sound is gonna be. And so that's why the first thing I always do before I start the bulk of my editing is I go through a noise removal process. Any questions? Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to amplify the track. Use my amplify tool. Now what Audacity is going to do is it's going to do most of the work for you. When I click amplify, it's gone through already and it's said, okay, based on the selection of audio that you've provided to me, the most that I can amplify this without experiencing clipping is 1.5 dB in this case. Okay. So it's already done that work for me. If I try to go above that, the OK button gets grayed out. It says, wait a minute, I have to actually tell it, look, I know that it's going to clip and I'm okay with that. So if we go back to our 1.5 dB, it was 1.5, right? I thought it was. Okay, it's happy now. And watch what will happen when I click OK. It'll go through if you watch the waveform. Boom. Waveform just grew a little bit. So it just amplified my sound a little bit. Now I do have the ability to adjust the volume of a specific track inside of my mix using a slider over here. So let's say I had two people talking back and forth. So I had them recorded on separate tracks. One person was quieter than the other. I could go in there and say, I'm just going to bring that person up a few dB, listen to it, and sit there and can do my adjustments. Listen. Sounds pretty decent. Yes, Remy. Absolutely. Using your panning here.